Hi, welcome back to MOAB, Making Music on a Budget. This time we're going to talk about motivation, failure and the ZFP. ZFP? Well, the zipper fly paradox. Why is it called that? Because I like giving silly names to my ideas. Thank you for joining me for this installment of Making Music on a Budget. We are going to talk about how to stay motivated, dealing with perceived failure. And these challenges and questions are all based on things that, audience members send in. And it's something I've been thinking about for a long time. So I came up with this concept called ZFP, zipper fly paradox. Just imagine wearing trousers and your fly is open. So you're walking around all day, having a windy feeling in your nether regions and people looking at you strangely. But if somebody were to point out, oh, your fly is open, you could fix it within 3 seconds. ZFP in a nutshell is that some things may be very easy to fix, but it might take you a very long time to get there on your own. So that's why I'm going to ask you a few questions. Also, along the way, I'm going to share many countless my fly is open moments of my own and then what I learned from them. If we talk about doing something, practicing something, creating something, publishing something, for me, it's like a Venn diagram. There are 3 circles. The first circle is assumption and expectation. The second circle is possibility space. And the third circle is result or outcome. So let us dig a bit deeper here. So if I'm talking about assumptions or expectations, I always try to ask myself, why am I doing something? Right? Why am I doing it this way? And it's quite interesting because in some cases, the why do I do it? And then later, of course, the how do I do it? Really can surface, strange assumptions. So at least in my case, it was a bit self-defeating because the type of joy and, endorphin rush that you get from listening to music or having listened to music for the first time when you were young, and the type you can get now, making it, practicing it, performing it is different. I think it's not the same whether you're the artist or the audience. This is the first thing. Secondly, what is the expectation? What will happen if you master something or write something or perform or record something a certain way? Is it just about being happy, having done something great, or is it about fame or money or Beatlemania or I don't know what kind of crazy assumptions we all have? So that's the expectation and the assumption part. So let's move on to the second circle, possibility space. This is everything from gear, budget, time, money, skill, talent, right? Knowledge, your fellow musicians who you are working with. So all of this determines the potential outcome. So that's why it's called possibility space. So you can see where I'm going with this, right? You need to check your expectations, your assumptions against the possibility space. What's possible in an ideal world where everything goes right and nothing goes wrong? Wrong assumptions and expectations or overly optimistic expectations or totally unrealistic assumptions lead to perceived failure. Motivation means I like doing something, I have positive outcome, it's a feedback loop. But on the other hand, if you do something, you expect something, it doesn't come true, repeatedly, your motivation will drop. So that's why I'm calling motivation the inverse of perceived failure. Why is it called perceived failure? Well, one thing I learned over many years and many decades since joining the OF club is that you can turn a perceived failure into a positive failure or a productive failure. Let me run you through a few examples of gear budget, possibility space, what gear do I have, what skill do I have, what time do I have, and so on and so forth. And I'm going to share them and you can check them against your own situation and see whether anything sounds familiar. I am going to start with a very embarrassing my fly is open moment. A long time before the iPhone was introduced, there was something called the iPod. Some of you may remember it. The iPod was just something that could play MP3 files. And in the very beginning, these MP3 players were either very big because they had a hard drive in them, or they were very small with very limited capacity. But then Apple was rumored to introduce the iPod, and the catchphrase was 1,000 songs in your pocket. I remember, and then I have to look it up, I think it was 2005 or 4, I don't know. I remember reading it somewhere as a rumor, and I thought, oh, why can't I write a song about this? You know, not so much about the iPod Nano, but the 1,000 songs. So I did write a song called You're Still 1,000 Songs to Me, right? You, basically the person I'm writing this for, keeps inspiring me to write song after song after song after song. And I did go into a studio and I did produce it with background singers and musicians and this and that. Let me play you a bit. You're still 1,000 songs to me. About my time, I can't wait until the road will finally be. Oh, how I long for that sweet. Okay, it's not really hit material, was more like a demo. I think I wrote to Apple or tried to reach out to them, and of course nobody responded. As we all know, if there is a campaign or a product launch on the horizon, everything is settled already, right? They weren't waiting for my song. But I think in my mind and in the expectation, I was keeping myself motivated, to really finish the song, to be able to then send it to them. And I had this, I don't know, totally unrealistic expectation of what would happen. As it didn't happen, I somehow gave up, right, on this song. And because I could have still pushed to talk to somebody and ask them what they thought and so on and so forth, but I just didn't have it in me. And this is interesting because many years later, I understood, okay, this is not so much about the product, even if it isn't perfect, it's more about really expecting something that is not going to happen. Let me give you another example. I had, and this was in another year, I think even earlier than that story, I had written a song called Bedtime Story. So I thought to myself, what if I involve other musicians to bring this song together? Because if I'm doing it on my own, especially at the beginning of the 2000s, I didn't have any of the technology that we have now to put something together quickly. I booked a studio, I brought some musicians together, and they played it, and they were all studio musicians, which means that nobody made a mistake, and it sounds good. I mean, let me play you a bit of the final studio version. But she says we're just a bedtime story. She tries to send me off to sleep. She says it's just at nighttime that we're all so close and in so deep. She says we don't know the least thing. Now that the night is all but past, tucks me in, puts me to sleep. Bedtime stories never last. So after it was finished, I played it to people, and I was very demotivated and disappointed because it just didn't elicit the reaction I thought, right? Yeah. Oh, this sounds like a real song and I'm singing. Everybody should be blown away. Many years later, I understood that the expectation, the assumption that if you just have talented musicians or you fly to Nashville and you book a studio or a producer and they record your song, that this would be good enough to really be, I don't know, to really be the song, right? This song, the best version of the song, that this assumption was just not correct. Now my view is, and I think this would also be more motivating, is let's try to put people together and have them practice this stuff or take it on the road, right? So coming back to the possibility space, sometimes the gear budget that you have just isn't high enough, but it may change. Let me give you an example. I had written a song in 2017 or 18 and just recorded a very, very simple demo on an iPad. So this song then was not being used for a long time because I just couldn't make it happen. I didn't have a band and I didn't have money to go into a studio and so on. But then 5 years later, there was an iPad Pro, there was Logic Pro, GarageBand, and so on and so forth. You could start booking musicians online. By the way, all of this is explained in my Crafting a Song series using all parts of the buffalo up on the channel. So the question I'm always asking myself, and maybe you want to do the same thing too, if my gear budget isn't high enough for a specific vision that I have, can I either wait or can I bring it down? You know, does it always have to be a full band? Can it also just be a guitar and a voice or piano or whatever, you know, just as an idea, you know? Your expectations and the gear and money and time budget have to match. Otherwise, you're just planning for failure. One last thing, talking about a gear budget. Just yesterday, I put together a very Frankenstein-like drum set. I used all the old things I had in my cellar, an old microphone from 30 years ago, an old cork drum machine to trigger it, an old, you know, old drum pads with a piezo sensor inside. So I'm going to play us out with just a little taste of what this Frankenstein-like drum set sounds like. And I'm surely going to use it to put down drum parts, to draft them, and then later I can still record them on a, I don't know, 20-piece drum set. But for now, this is all I need to create something. Okay, see you next time on Making Music on a Budget. MOAB.